From a World War II film about a dressed-up corpse to a creepy horror comedy about a satanic child, Netflix has a whole slew of hidden gems that are just waiting to be discovered by you. 30 Minutes or Less is a lively action comedy anchored by some of the strongest comic voices of the new millennium. In the film, Jesse Eisenberg plays Nick Davis, a nerdy pizza delivery boy.
Tick-tock!
However, one of Nick's deliveries goes haywire when two wannabe criminals take him hostage, attach a bomb to his chest, and force him to rob a bank. Well aware of his limitations and the dark absurdity of the situation, Nick brings along Chet, an old friend whose relationship with him has grown strained. If Nick and Chet want to survive their predicament, they'll have to solve their issues and figure out how to be pals again. Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian had this to say about 30 Minutes or Less: "It's entirely ridiculous, but it gallops cheerfully along. Everything is carried off with flair and ingenuity." The best science fiction tales aren't just about unsure futures and alien worlds. They also use new and unfamiliar environments to point out universal truths about the human condition. The script for Advantageous is that kind of story. The film is set in a technologically advanced New York City of tomorrow, where the divide between the rich and the poor is more pronounced than ever. As a result of this class struggle, mothers will do absolutely anything to make sure their children get an upper hand in life. For Gwen, a wealthy cosmetic procedure salesperson who gets fired right as her daughter enters an expensive school, that means agreeing to be a test subject for a painful procedure. The procedure involves having her consciousness transferred entirely into a new body. Complications arise, calling into question whether or not this new Gwen is even Gwen at all. In its review of Advantageous, the magazine of fantasy and science fiction called the film quiet and affecting. A young woman named Alice secretly performs explicit acts as Lola, camgirl extraordinaire. Though she's willing to do whatever it takes to rise through the ranks of popularity on her seedy hosting site, Alice is able to keep an emotional distance from her work. That is, until a dark contingent encourages her to perform a shocking act of violence. In his review of the film, Ty Burr of the Boston Globe wrote, "Cam plays with both psychological horror genre tropes and darker existential themes, and its clear-eyed view of the drab realities of a camgirl's life is both refreshing and ultra-creepy." You might be wondering what Dolemite Is My Name is doing on a list of underrated movies. After all, the film was a favorite among critics and was nominated for a few awards, but it was also snubbed by the Academy Awards, not receiving a single Oscar nomination. So the film is on this list precisely because of the snubs it received. It's a shame the movie didn't get more recognition because Dolemite Is My Name is terrific. Dolemite Is My Name tells the story of Rudy Ray Moore, comedian and blaxploitation actor known for his Dolemite movies. The movie covers Moore's life from the period right before he became a star all the way to the Los Angeles premiere of his first film. Eddie Murphy, in a comeback of sorts, does an outstanding job as Moore.
Dolemite is my name, and rapping and tapping is my game.
Not only is Murphy great as Moore, but his co-stars are amazing too. Wesley Snipes is wonderful playing the director of Dolemite, while Davine Joy Randolph is tremendous as Lady Reed, Moore's longtime friend and confidant. The costumes by Oscar-winning designer Ruthie Carter are also a standout in this well-made comedy. A coming-of-age story about people just trying to find their place in the world, Dumplin boasts a cast led by comedy legend Jennifer Aniston and charismatic star on the rise Danielle McDonald. The latter plays Willowdean Dixon. She prefers to be called Will, but her mother insists on referring to her as Dumplin. A supremely confident and witty teenager, Dumplin stands up for herself against bullies who criticize her for her weight. Standing up to her mother, however, is a lot harder. So what better way to establish herself than competing in her mother's beloved Miss Teen Bluebonnet pageant? What initially begins as a protest against pageants and her mother soon becomes a celebration of all types of beauty, thus prompting other overlooked misfits to join Dumplin. In her review of the film, Elizabeth Weitzman of The Wrap wrote, "This is a generous movie and an unrepentant fantasy at that, so it's hard not to meet it with open-heartedness." The Netflix series The Last Kingdom is a historical drama about King Alfred the Great of what would become England. The show blends actual events from the 9th century with fiction to tell the story of how kingdoms were brought together to form a united England. At the start, the land has been captured by the invading Vikings, with only King Alfred and his kingdom of Wessex standing in the way to total domination.
Come and fight! Why are you afraid?
The Last Kingdom tells the story of Uhtred of Bebbanburg, a noble Saxon who gets kidnapped as a slave and then raised by the Danes. Uhtred is conflicted. To whom does he pledge his allegiance? So he's ultimately forced to choose between the people that raised him and the land of his birth. The series has everything you'd want in a historical drama covering this time period: brutal fighting, great characters, an intriguing story, loads of death, and gorgeous cinematography. So if you're in the market for a show full of English accents and good old-fashioned swordplay, The Last Kingdom is for you. An unassuming movie, but one speckled with action, tension, and agonizing personal drama, Leave No Trace is about the unbreakable bond between a parent and child. Will is an Iraq war veteran suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Will's PTSD is so severe that he's become deeply uncomfortable interacting with people. So he raises his teenage daughter Tom in vast forested parks outside of Portland. After authorities find them and set them up with a home on a Christmas tree farm, Tom enjoys the stability. She also likes being around other kids, but when Will makes them leave again, Tom is forced to choose between her family and her own path. In his review of the film, David Stratton of The Australian wrote, "Leave No Trace is a small film, but a quietly memorable one." Little Evil is a horror comedy about an eager-to-please guy who marries a woman who has a son from a previous marriage. He's desperate to connect with the inscrutable little guy so that the three of them can all come together as a happy blended family. That's a difficult task, as the kid is actually the spawn of Satan. Needless to say, he's not afraid to unleash pure evil and terror on his well-meaning new stepdad. Amanda Sink of The Hollywood Outsider wrote, "Little Evil is the Omen by way of Shaun of the Dead." Maniac is hard to categorize. It's a darkly comic, often surreal, and lightly dystopian miniseries set in a future world where gadgetry and pharmaceuticals have rapidly progressed. In the series, Annie, who's desperate and guilt-ridden, and Owen, who's the troubled black sheep of a rich family, lock down for a heavily controlled psychological drug trial. The trial is operated by the eccentric Dr. James K. Mantelray, who is literally and explicitly in love with machinery. He also lives in the shadow of his mother, Dr. Greta Mantelray, a popular pop psychologist and best-selling author. The series also explores the minds of Owen and Annie, who live out their deepest fears and insecurities in disparate ways, such as an exotic animal heist and a Lord of the Rings-esque fantasy. Not only dazzling and challenging, Maniac manages to be vibrant, ridiculous, and to varying degrees moving, according to Willa Paskin of Slate. Operation Mincemeat tells a fascinating and gripping but little-known World War II story, one so filled with audacious and foolhardy participants that it's hard to believe it's real. Set in 1943, the Allied forces planned to stop Hitler's conquest of Europe with a multi-pronged attack on Sicily, a troubling option because it would ensure mass casualties on both sides. And so, two elite British intelligence officers come up with a bizarre scheme known as Operation Mincemeat.
Our other deception plans are strategies designed to confuse the enemy, throw them off balance. Mincemeat, on the other hand, is an outright lie.
With plenty of help from higher-ups and the rank and file, they dress up an abandoned corpse in a Royal Marines uniform and plant evidence of a false Allied invasion on it. From there, the intelligence officers wait for the Axis forces to discover the dressed-up corpse and act accordingly on the misinformation. In his rave of the film, Jake Wilson of The Age wrote, "Operation Mincemeat is a genuine surprise package. It prompts nostalgia, if not for the war, then for an almost equally distant era of skillfully crafted entertainment." After expelling Belgian colonialists in 1960, the Congo declared independence. So in 1961, the United Nations arrived to help support the newly formed government. UN peacekeeping troops soon got caught up in a civil war between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the natural resource-heavy secessionist state of Katanga. The Siege of Jadotville tells of a little-known moment in this seven-day conflict in which 3,000 mercenaries working for mining companies in Katanga attacked the 150 Irish troops serving under the UN. Led by Commandant Pat Quinlan, the defense held its ground, pushing back the thousands of attackers while waiting for reinforcements to arrive. The film is a harrowing, high-stakes drama loaded with military action and almost unbelievable acts of courage and tactical brilliance. If you're a fan of war movies, The Siege of Jadotville is not to be missed. The fear of turning into one's parents as they settle into adulthood is an extremely common worry. It's also the basis for the psychological supernatural horror film Umma. Amanda and her teenage daughter Chrissy enjoy an idyllic existence on their farm, hanging out and tending to bees. However, everything changes when the remains of Amanda's mother arrive from Korea. Umma wasn't a good mom. She was cruel and abusive, and it was the reason for a long estrangement. But what remains of her bodily form literally haunts Amanda as she quickly evolves into her mother at her most monstrous and horrific. While critics found the film to be uneven, Umma is still worth a watch. The film is original and quirky, while its unpredictable plot and character choices subvert many horror movie cliches.